piece of information that the Obama administration may have been spying on a rival campaign, you think? But for some reason, we're only just learning about it now. Why is that? Apparently because the FBI and the DOJ deliberately hid that information from Congress. Of course, Congress has authority over the FBI. It's not the other way around, as much as the FBI would like to believe that. So this deception would be gross misconduct at minimum. But of course, gross misconduct would be nothing new in the FBI of Jim Comey. Dan Bongino was a former Secret Service agent and NYPD officer, and he joins us tonight. Dan, this is one of those stories that's so shocking, if true, that A, you don't want to believe it's true, that our government would do, the Obama administration would have done something like that. But B, you have to press carefully on the details. What do we know about this?
Yeah, you're right, Tucker. For the sake of the constitutional republic, you pray this story isn't true. There's no partisan advantage. This is the very idea of having big R God-given rights has been shredded if, in fact, they can't produce hard evidence of any crime yet, and yet a human intelligence asset may have been inserted in your political rival's campaign. I mean, how this isn't front page news on every newspaper across the globe is stunning. But Tucker, that's not it, though. Keep in mind, just a couple weeks ago, Devin Nunes on this network in an interview with Maria Bartiromo had another bombshell, that there was no official foreign intelligence through official channels passed into the United States. That was a huge bombshell because notice what he didn't say. He didn't say it didn't pass through unofficial channels. So we know two things. Potentially that information was laundered through the State Department and potentially the U.S. Senate. And yes, we know there was potentially a human asset in the Trump campaign. Unbelievable.
Is there any precedence for this? Has this ever happened before? Has it ever been alleged before in a presidential campaign?
Not in the United States. I'm sure it's happened in some spy novels and in some third world countries where this may be common. But Tucker, this is a story so unbelievable on its face that I've said to people, it's like the sickest spy novel I've ever read, except it actually happened. If you were to give this to a book agent and tell them it was a story about the United States government, they very well might laugh at you and say, this is so absurd, this could never happen. But Tucker, I have my suspicions about who this asset is, as do many others, by the way. This is going to be explosive, though, when this name comes out, because the list of suspects is very short. And there are some very suspicious people who are connected to people within our intelligence community now. But this is the key point, Tucker. Also connected to political operators working for Democrats while connected to foreign intelligence assets as well. This is really serious stuff. This isn't a joke. And like you said before, I really wish none of this was true, but it appears sadly that it is.
Well, I mean, it would be a crime to begin with. Do you think it's true? Is there evidence that the FBI was receiving information from within the Trump campaign during the campaign?
Yes. And they're not only that. I believe there's more than one source for the FBI. Now, whether there was more than one source that was paid may be an entirely different story. I believe that based on reporting, Tucker, that's already out there. So, I know a lot of people out there love the conspiracy theory label when information makes them uncomfortable. I'm only telling you things that are already out there in the public domain. There are a number of names out there already of people who, by the way, are connected to the Obama team. One person who's being represented by Obama's former White House lawyer, Tucker, was present at a meeting Bob Mueller's investigating. A meeting right now with Russians that they're claiming has to do with Trump, but the meeting was with people who are actually connected to the Clintons. One of the guys at the meeting is literally being represented by Obama's former White House lawyer, who, by the way, worked with Andy Weissman, who's working with Bob Mueller on the special counsel when they were on the Enron prosecution. This is a big, contaminated witch's brew of people who are all connected to each other.
And in some ways not surprising, because they always accuse you of what they're doing, a la Eric Schneiderman. I mean, it's a very... Thank you, Dan. It was great to see you tonight. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. You got it.
Well, the world's creepiest porn lawyer has gotten very famous recently by attacking Donald Trump's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. That's probably been good for his business. On the downside, all of this has invited heightened scrutiny of his own past business ventures. Trace Gallagher has more on that. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Tucker. When Tully's Coffee went bankrupt 5 years ago, Michael Avenatti's investment firm bought the company at auction for just over $9 million. Since then, the Seattle Times says Avenatti's company has been named in more than 50 state and federal complaints, including commercial lawsuits and warrants for unpaid taxes. Washington state lawyer David Nold says Avenatti carried out an illegal pump and dump scheme where he ran the Tully's coffee shops, withheld state and federal taxes from his employees, but then didn't pay his state and federal taxes. Avenatti responds by denying the claims and calling David Nold a, quote, unethical hack of a lawyer, despite the fact that the Washington State Bar Association says Nold has no record of ethical or other violations. But Michael Avenatti also claims Tully's Coffee has long been under new ownership, and yet in court testimony last year, Avenatti reportedly listed himself as the chairman and principal of Tully's. And now we know Avenatti hasn't just faced business tax liens. We found records dating back 7 years of personal tax liens, both state and federal, for $1.5 million, including a $300,000 federal tax lien from just 3 months ago. Tucker.
Big lien. Trace, thanks. Quick programming note. Last night, we mentioned the creepy porn lawyer you've just been hearing about, the one you've seen on TV recently threatening people. And it got us thinking, so we checked. According to the Washington Free Beacon, between March 7th and yesterday, that guy appeared on CNN and MSNBC 108 times. That's according to one source. The real number could be higher than that. Anyway, it's a lot of CNN and MSNBC, and we thought we would add a little diversity to his media diet, diversity, of course, being our strength. So we invited the creepy porn lawyer onto this show. We called his office, or what he said was his office. It may have been a booth at a Wendy's in Passaic, maybe a White Castle, you never know. In any case, he turned us down flat. Too bad. Would have been fun. Maybe when Jeff Zucker tires of him over at CNN, he will reconsider our offer. That won't be long. We'd enjoy it. Instead, tonight, we're joined by someone who is not an actual porn lawyer, but has closely followed the career of the guy we were just talking about. Julian Epstein is a former chief counsel to Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins us tonight. Julian, thanks a lot for coming on. So,
good evening, Tucker.
There's a bit of a disconnect here. The argument from Democrats from day one has been that President Trump is too shady to be president. In order to make that case, they're now using a creepy porn lawyer with a history of financial problems. Is he really the best standard bearer for your message, would you say?
Well, I think Michael Avenatti has been effective on television. I think he's been effective in advancing the interests of his client, and he's used television much more effectively than most lawyers do. I'm not sure he is the standard bearer for Democrats. I think he has. I think the Stormy Daniels issue, to be honest, I think Essential Consultants, I think, is a sideshow. I think there is nothing in Essential Consultants' story that we know where there's any laws that are necessarily broken, but I think there are relevant questions that should be asked about was Essential Consultants being used for a Russian slush fund, a campaign finance slush fund, for laundering money, lots of things that people have kind of been breathlessly alleging, but there's no evidence of. I think there's questions to be asked,
there's no,
but certainly no evidence of any legal violation. But I don't think that's the central issue. I still think, if I can just finish the point, Tucker, I still think the central question here for Democrats, as far as Democrats are concerned, is whether the president knew or was actively involved in Russian interference in any way. And there's no evidence of that. I'm not saying there's evidence of that.
And by the way, I agree, but then why? Look, I think that is a central question. There's no evidence more than a year in. Maybe we're going to find out that he teamed up with Putin to steal the election from Hillary. Probably not going to find that out. But for the point right now, it's all about the creepy porn lawyer. And I'm wondering, like, what exactly is the point of this? I don't know what the interests of his client are. I don't know who he represents. I do know I'd be very uncomfortable if he got a hold of my confidential bank records. Wouldn't you?
Well, I think we need to find out how he got the information, for sure. I think there are questions there. But to be honest, Tucker, I think your indictment is of the industry that you're a participant in, which is the cable television industry. I think it is the obsession of the cable television industry. I think Bob Mueller and the Democrats, for their part, are not necessarily obsessed about this,
Julian,
although
you've
it
been
does
doing this
raise
a long
money.
time. Cable responds to ratings. I don't think he's been on this channel. As I just said, we tried to have him on the show because I want to meet this guy. He should
come on this show.
I think it'd be amusing as hell, but he's too busy on the other channels. Whose viewers are responding. That's why Jeff Zucker's put him on, every day for 2 months. So he really is one of the most famous Democrats in America. He's a partisan Democrat. He worked on Democratic campaigns, dozens of them. So what does that tell you?
But I don't think that's where the Democratic Party is right now. I mean, I think what Avenatti is doing is relevant because it gets to whether there were campaign finance violations with the Stormy Daniels payment. It gets to whether Essential Consultants was being misused as a Russian slush fund, as a campaign finance slush fund.
But how would creepy porn lawyer know about the Russian connection? Like, what expertise does he have? I mean, is he like a Russian speaker or an expert on Russian slush funds?
I don't want to get off subject, but Essential Consultants, Michael Cohen's law firm, had a client whose principal benefactor was a Russian oligarch connected to Putin.
Right. No, I read the story.
So there are questions there, Tucker.
What does that have to do with creepy porn lawyer?
I just want to make another point.
Yeah, very quick.
I want to make another point because I don't think that he is a standard bearer for Democrats. I think what Democrats are saying is not impeachment, not that Trump violated criminal laws, but let's get the facts on the table. We know that people around Trump,
I've heard
who were considered to be Russian agents.
Let me ask you, we're almost out of time.
No evidence that Trump did that.
Right, and maybe we'll find out again that he teamed up with Putin.
Right, but that's what Democrats
Let me just ask you one last question, and please answer honestly. Picture yourself standing in your kitchen at night, getting one last glass of water from the kitchen sink, and you look out into the backyard, and there's creepy porn lawyer. How do you respond?
Well, I live in an apartment building, so I don't think I'd be able to see him if I looked out.
Let's see you see him in the alley outside. How do you respond? What's your gut reaction? You see that guy in your backyard. How do you respond?
I would invite Avenatti in because I'd have a lot of questions I'd like to talk to him about. If I saw anybody outside my if I saw anybody outside my kitchen when I was having my last glass of water at night, of course I would be creeped out. As would you, of course I would.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he's not raising. It doesn't mean, Tucker, that he's not raising some significant
you know what? I'm an open-minded man, as you know, Julian. I'm just raising some important questions, I think. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
California's falling apart fast. It's sad. Kamala Harris has a solution to that. Smoke more weed and you'll notice it less. That story coming up.
Tucker Carlson.
California and New Jersey spent decades as beacons of opportunity to the entire world. Now people can't flee them fast enough. In California, houses are unaffordable, needles pile up on the streets. The middle class has been displaced by an unending wave of low-paid illegal immigrants. More than 100,000 people are spending the night tonight on the sidewalk in California. But Democratic Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker have a solution: smoke more weed.
I am proud to formally announce that I'm signing on to the Marijuana Justice Act. It's the smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do.
2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to using drugs. Congresspeople, senators have admitted to using marijuana.
But there are other communities for which it's completely criminalized.
It's time that we not only legalize marijuana in our states, but expunge the records of those who've been carrying that burden of past convictions for too long.
All because of their use of a drug that otherwise should be considered legal.
Get high, it's a civil rights victory. Ethan Behrman is a California radio show host and joins us tonight. Ethan, great to see you. I just want to preface our conversation by saying that I don't think people who smoke weed should be in jail. I think the drug war hasn't worked very well, like gun control. Banning something doesn't make it go away. And I think that alcohol is in a lot of ways worse than marijuana. So I believe all that. I'm just amazed that now the ruling class is basically, having failed to take care of its own people, is telling them maybe you should smoke more weed and become more passive and less concerned by our failures. I don't really think that's an accident, do you?
Well, I don't think that they're telling us to smoke more weed. I think that people are smoking weed, and I think 80 years of reefer madness hasn't stopped people from smoking weed.
Yeah, I agree.
And as you already pointed out, it's not worse than alcohol. If anything, there are numerous potential medical benefits of marijuana that we haven't even studied because it's been a Schedule I drug. We need to get rid of that classification, legalize it. Look, states like Colorado have generated over $250 million a year in taxes to support the state government.
So that's part. No, you're making my case for me. And by the way, I think we should fully explore the potential health benefits of cannabinoids. I mean, why wouldn't we? We should. Of course we should, and there probably are big ones. I'm all for that. But why shouldn't I be suspicious when over 100,000 Californians are sleeping outside tonight because people like Kamala Harris have done a terrible job taking care of their own people, and her solution is, hey, smoke more weed so I can have more money in the tax coffers, and you will be less likely to stage a revolution against my bad leadership. I'm not paranoid. That seems like an obvious bread and circuses ploy to me.
Well, she's a pretty new senator, so I can't.
She's been elected statewide for a long time, as you know.
Well, I mean, the Attorney General, but what we have with the homeless population, there is a lot of care that is needed there. And if some of that revenue goes towards psychological care, addiction care, I think that's a wonderful thing. So if the people are already smoking marijuana or consuming it, eating it, edibles, whatever, CBD oil, let's legalize tax, regulate, get it out of the shadows. How about this? That defunds the cartels, because who's bringing it across the border illegally? Those are cartels. You want to stop them.
It's not that simple, actually, because cartels are, it's just a market, and when the price of anything goes up, if you can undercut it illegally, you'll do that. You see that with cigarettes, which are widely bootlegged because of high tax rates. So it's actually not quite as simple as you're making it. But here's the point. Let's not compare marijuana to alcohol. I agree it's less harmful. I don't drink. But let's not do that. Let's compare it to sobriety, being aware and awake and fully experiencing your life and maybe fighting back against misused power. People who are high don't do that, let's be honest, and you know that.
Well, but if they're busy drinking beer, is that any different? So if we're going to do morality, we already know prohibition didn't work.
No, but I'm not calling for prohibition. I'm just saying, why shouldn't I be suspicious? These people have failed their own people, and then they're encouraging us to smoke more weed. You don't see the connection at all.
I don't believe anybody is encouraging people to smoke more weed unless you have cancer and you're not able to keep food down during your chemotherapy, which is a wonderful side benefit of using cannabis. I don't smoke it either, Tucker, but I see the benefits medicinally for a lot of people who benefit. Also, again, if it's one of those situations where people are already doing it and criminal elements are benefiting from it, bringing it out into the sunlight is the ideal solution.
Yeah, and the government should be getting rich on it. That's what it is.
Well,
we have no idea how to balance the budget.
It's definitely a revenue source.
Buy more weed. Oh, it's so depressing. I know you agree with me deep down, Ethan. We're out of time, sadly. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Kamala Harris isn't yet suggesting that the masses go on opiates, but that's basically what they're saying. California is failing very fast, a state where only illegal immigrants and wealthy tech barons now feel welcome.
With thousands living in close proximity on Skid Row, hygiene is always an issue. But with an official outbreak of hepatitis A, it's now a necessity.
Kate Steinle was fatally shot in 2015 by a repeat felon and 5-time deportee who was shielded by the city's sanctuary policy.
The stench of urine and feces is strong. Welcome to one of San Francisco's newest tent cities.
Authorities are certain they would have arrested 800 more immigrants, but Oakland's mayor issued a statement over the weekend warning of the raids.
California matters. It's our biggest state. It's the leading edge of everything. Victor Davis Hanson is a lifelong resident of the state. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. He joins us tonight. Mr. Hanson, thanks a lot for coming on. You described the economic distribution of California recently as medieval. What does that mean?
Well, that means that about 75% of the geographical area is inhabited by 25% of lower income people by and large. And we have a coastal corridor from San Diego to Berkeley where we have Caltech and Stanford, and we have about $3 trillion in capitalized Silicon Valley companies. And this is where all the policy is made. And these people who make it, the lawyers, academics, politicians, are never subject to the ramifications of their own ideologies because they have such wealth. And so California is a medieval society in the sense that we have the highest basket of gasoline sales and income tax, but we rank 45th in school test scores, 49th according to Forbes in infrastructure, among the highest kilowatt rates in the nation. Our gasoline tax is going to be the highest. Cost of gasoline is the highest, but it doesn't affect the people on the coast who make these regulations. I mean, where I work at Stanford, it's 70 degrees or 65 degrees. I don't have to turn on the air conditioning or the heater, but where I live in the San Joaquin Valley, poor people have to go into Walmart because they can't afford to turn on their air conditioner. So people in this medieval society on the coast, they don't believe in water transfers for agriculture and for poor people, but they surely do for the artificial landscapes in the Bay Area, whether it's Hetch Hetchy or the California Water Project. So that attitude it sort of reverberates throughout California, and it's a dysfunctional state because of that. There's the middle class, about 4 or 5 million people have left. We had about 4 or 5 million people come illegally from southern Mexico. And we've had an enormous concentration of global wealth in a very small geographical area. And you put all that together and you get what you have now.
It's unbelievable. They're running it for their own benefit. Victor Davis Hanson, one of the great summaries of what's happening in California. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says not all of America's immigrants are assimilating well, mostly good people, but is bringing them here good for us? He's being attacked, of course. We'll explain it coming up. With NPR, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly summed up what until recently, very recently, was a mainstream position on illegal immigration. Most of the people who sneak in are probably decent people. They're just looking for a better life, but that doesn't mean their arrival here is good for America. Listen.
Let me step back and tell you that the vast majority of the people that move illegally into the United States are not bad people. They're not criminals. They're not MS-13. But they're also not people that would easily assimilate into the United States. They're overwhelmingly rural people. In the countries they come from, 4th, 5th, 6th grade educations are kind of the norm. They're coming here for a reason, and I sympathize with the reason. But the laws are the laws.
Is there anything you disagree with in there? Like pretty much anything anyone connected to Trump says these days, though. Kelly's remarks set off an instant outrage bomb. MSNBC's military analyst denounced General Kelly as, quote, racist and openly bigoted, and speculated he would have been kicked out of the Marine Corps for saying something so awful. Well, let's hope that's not true, because what General Kelly said was provably true, and truth is still a defense and always will be. According to the UN, the average American receives about 13 years of education. In Mexico, that number is 8.6 years. In El Salvador, it's 6.5 years. In Guatemala, it's 6.3. According to the Migration Poly Institute, fully 70% of Salvadoran immigrants here have limited English proficiency. There are, of course, exceptions to that, but overall, it's a badly educated group that comes here illegally. That might not have been a big deal 100 years ago when a humming industrial economy needed workers for its factories, but our factories are closed, long closed. Technology is now in the process of eliminating millions more blue-collar jobs in America. And the last thing we need is more low-skilled immigration. Any economist can tell you that. We can't even take care of our own low-skilled workers. Hundreds of thousands that are now sleeping outside tonight and every night. They're homeless. As for assimilation, you've been to Miami recently? But don't take our word for it. Here's what Pew's research says. Fully 95% of American Hispanics, according to Pew, quote, say it is important that future generations of Hispanics living in the U.S. be able to speak Spanish. Even by the 3rd and 4th generation, about half of Hispanic parents here still speak English, rather Spanish, to their children. That's not immoral, obviously, but it's definitely not assimilation. Shut up, says MSNBC. We don't want to hear the facts. We need the votes. Be quiet, or we'll shout you down as a thought criminal. Raul Reyes is an attorney and a columnist, and he says Kelly's remarks were somehow unacceptable. But I don't know how you can say that, Raul, since they're strictly speaking true. I mean, I'm citing UN numbers. What he said is right.
Right. Well, to me, in my view, Kelly's statement, we have to look at the whole of it in context. And in that sense, it is factually as well as philosophically problematic. Factually, look, he starts off by saying that all these people who are coming in through the southern border, that they are not all MS-13. Yes, that's true. He says they're not all, going to commit crimes. That is true. And that is provable by various studies and statistics on immigrants and criminality. Then he goes through then his statement that these people who are coming in, that immigrants are not, current waves of immigrants are not assimilating into the United States. And that is not true. Now, you mentioned this Pew study talking about how Hispanic parents, grandparents believe it's very important for their children and grandchildren to speak Spanish. And that is absolutely correct. That same study finds that just like every other wave of immigrants into this country, these Latino immigrants, the first generation, yes, by and large, they speak Spanish. Parents tend to be bilingual. by the third generation, the Spanish is no longer the dominant language.
Raul, since you're wading into the deep end of the
so that pretty much lines up with what past waves of immigrants
Since you're
have done.
throwing facts around, you're kind of the deep end of the fact pool here. What percentage of households in California right now speak Spanish at home? Do you know?
Offhand, no, I don't. But I think there's a healthy number of Spanish that are bilingual.
Slow down. Let me tell you, over 40.
Right.
So that's not assimilation. Again, I'm not against speaking Spanish. I'm not against bilingualism. What I'm saying is that's the opposite of the way we have always done immigration in the past, in which we say to new immigrants, you must adopt our culture and our language, and you have to do it thoroughly. We're not doing that now. So it's not assimilation. You didn't address what he said about education levels because it's demonstrably true. People who come over our southern border have lower education. Okay, so but why in a post-industrial economy, when blue-collar jobs are going away, why wouldn't we only admit software engineers or people who have skills that we need now? What are we doing?
Okay. You and I think we have different ideas. So, different viewpoint on assimilation. I personally think there's nothing wrong with people speaking Spanish or being bilingual in whatever language they want at home. In this instance, what John Kelly was talking about, he was talking about the jumping off point for this conversation was this influx of people at our southern border, why they're implementing a zero tolerance policy for these migrants, and in the process, having a procedure where we will be the U.S. government will be separating women from children.
Please answer my question. No, excuse me. No, excuse me. No, then please answer crisply. Why would you, at a time when blue-collar jobs are disappearing, import people with lower education levels than native-born Americans? Why wouldn't you import people who can do the jobs that we need done, not the jobs that are going away? It's really simple.
There's 2 points here. Number one, because U.S. unemployment is at a historic low. I believe it's a 17-year low. Hispanic unemployment is at an all-time low. African-American unemployment is at a historic low. So our economy does have room to grow, and immigrants are the people who can drive parts of our economy. But second, this is the point I was trying to make about Kelly's comments in the context. What the discussion is about, we have to go back to the law. Our asylum law makes no provision for what level of education people have, whether or not they can speak English, what the parameters of how many people we're going to allow under asylum. It just involves a credible fear test. And whether
you don't care, actually. You don't. I've reached a conclusion. You don't care whether this is good for the country, whether it's good for its economy, whether it's good for our culture. You just don't care because you're totally ignoring the central point. Technology is destroying a lot of jobs. The people we're importing right now can't do the new jobs. You don't care. You don't care. You just blow right past it. No big deal.
No, well, what I'm saying is I would go back to the law in this context, which is our asylum law. And that says that these people who are coming from Central America, they have the legal right, even though they are unauthorized
they have the legal right.
They have the legal right
as foreign citizens
to present themselves to Border Patrol and apply.
What about my right as an American? All right, we're out of time.
Thank
you, Raul. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
A Belgian political party wants to transform the country into something very different from what it is today. Katie Hopkins just spent a lot of time in Belgium, and she brings her report to us next. Islamic parties aren't just in the Middle East anymore. Belgium, the country in Europe, is scheduled to hold elections in just a few months. There's a rising star in the political landscape there. It's called the Islam Party. Its stated purpose is to implement Sharia and transform Belgium into an Islamic state. Members of the Islam Party won 2 races in 2012. The party's hoping to expand its success this round. Katie Hopkins writes for Rebel Media. She has traveled to the town of Molenbeek. Lots of jihadis there. You may remember it because it was the place the 2015 Paris terrorists plotted their attack. She interviewed the town's mayor, who seemed to regard its ties to jihad as a marginal issue at best. Watch.
Were you told that Salah Abdel Salah was a suspected terrorist in Molenbeek? Were you given that list? Were you given that information in October 2016? 15?
Yes. Well, we had a list, but this list was known. I just had a list of a few names. Well, I would say more than 30 names, but it was not the job of the local police to follow those people.
Not my job, she said. Katie Hopkins joins us tonight. Katie, that's unbelievable. Are we misreading that because of the language barrier? Did the mayor just say it's not her job to keep track of dangerous people in her community?
Absolutely. She's the mayor of Molenbeek. She's been there for about 6 years or so now. She was given the name and the location. He ran a bar in the town of the coordinator of the Paris attacks, where 130 were killed, 415 were maimed. And when I said to her, you had that list, you had his name, you did nothing, she said, it's not my job. It was not my job to do something. And of course, this is part of the problem in the jihadi capital of Europe, where I've just spent 3 days, is that politicians turn a blind eye because they are dependent on the voters who are Muslim and they want their support.
So it's a demographic thing. I mean, at a certain point, you become captive to the people who are changing your society.
That's absolutely right. You know, what I've just seen, I've spent 3 days walking the streets of Molenbeek. It's known as a place that other reporters won't go because it's 80% Muslim. There's a lot of Sunnis there, a lot of Salafists, a lot of Shiites, very hardcore kind of religious individuals. But you've got a triumvirate, the perfect storm of a lot of unauthorized mosques, particularly controlled by Iran, and money flowing in. You've got one type of population, 80% Moroccan heritage Muslims. And then you've got politicians and police who, I'm told by informers, are taking backhanders, who are happy to turn a blind eye. And that's why you've got terror being plotted in Belgium. But that terror then, of course, drives 2 hours away to destroy people in capital cities like London here, or indeed Paris. And bear in mind, Ramadan is just around the corner. What do the rest of Belgium think of this? Ordinary Belgians, are they for this? Yeah. It's so interesting. Obviously, there's a great deal of white flight. I walk through, I think you have images and stills there, the marketplace. I was the only woman with my head uncovered. Everybody there is in a burqa. The Islam Party that are putting up 28 candidates in September, they want segregated transport, segregated living, and they want halal everywhere and Sharia. And I can see it coming. So there's a massive white flight. And academics and teachers and certain individuals will tell me their truths. They will tell me there are unauthorized mosques, that the teachers are giving up hope, that people want to move out, but they don't want to be seen to be saying that because it goes against the liberal narrative. But really, these areas still exist. There's a massive mosque there, run by Saudi. It was given a 99-year free lease on a massive building in Belgium, as long as they could bring in extremist imams to have access to these migrants. And then we wonder why we end up living with the jihadis next door. Is this a permanent situation? Are these people residents, citizens of Belgium? I mean, is it temporary? No, it's not temporary at all. They have citizenship. 95,000 people live in Molenbeek. About 85% of them are Moroccan heritage, but they are French nationals, often Belgian born. But what's so interesting, in talking to a teacher today who didn't want to be on record, she was saying that her teaching colleagues find that no matter what, how many generations in they are, 3 generations in now, they always have one foot still in Morocco. And that's very much the point that she made. Those old Islamic and Muslim traditions matter more than any European heritage they may have. Amazing. Not the Belgium most of us think of. Katie Hopkins, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Tucker. President Trump's speech preempted it last night, but after the break, final exam is back. Can you outwit our news experts at remembering what happened last week? And then our social media experts say that there's a new movement afoot online. We're not going to take credit for it, but at the top of the show, you may have heard us cover the creepy porn lawyer who's suddenly in the news. He's now trending all over social media. Hashtag creepy porn lawyer. Again, not our doing, but enjoy it.
Allergies with sinus
Time now for Final Exam, where we pit our friends here at Fox against one another. Figure out who's been paying attention to the news this week. Joining us tonight, A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics, and Fox News correspondent Griff Jenkins. Both have done this show before. Both have won before, which increases the pressure on tonight's contest. There she is. She brought AB Stoddard, you brought
I'm defending champion.
Yeah, I won last week, and so you
I won like last year.
Initial stand for always brilliant when found the smartest woman in Washington.
Why did you
go against
let him come back to win 2 weeks in a row?
Adjusting expectations down. Griff Jenkins, you're a wise man. You know the rules, both of you, but for our viewers who may not remember them, hands on buzzers. I ask the questions. First one to buzz in gets to answer the question. You must wait until I finish asking each question in order to buzz in. Every correct answer is worth a point. Each incorrect answer detracts a point from your total, tragically, but those are the rules. Best of 5 wins. Are you ready?
Trying to be.
Trying to be. That's good enough for us. Question 1. According to the New York Post, America's greatest newspaper, which Hollywood Trump hater is facing legal trouble due to oversized donations she once made to Democratic candidates? Griff Jenkins.
Roseanne Barr.
Roseanne Barr.
Oh, he's trying to lose Rosie O'Donnell.
You don't get to answer. Roseanne Barr, roll the tape.
I got the wrong Roseanne.
Rosie O'Donnell under fire tonight for what appears to be an illicit campaign contribution to at least 5 Democratic candidates, exceeding the maximum amount allowed under campaign finance law. Boasting in a tweet today, quote, all my donations, my goal is to support all those opposed to Trump.
I love how after decades in Washington, your conspiracy-minded analysis was he's trying to lose.
Yeah, I know, and I've lost contact with this.
Yes,
I need to bring
buzz
one.
in.
I'm going to have a practice session at home for a week.
My good luck sling is just a little rusty.
Yeah, with one arm he beat you.
Let's
so
go.
let that be a lesson
No,
to you.
he was wrong. Wrong, Rosie.
Good point. Question 2 is multiple choice. This week, California became the first U.S. state to mandate that some residents do what? A, compost, B, recycle, or C, go solar. Griff Jenkins, once again.
C, go solar.
C, go solar. To the tape we go.
In a controversial move, the state of California now mandating that beginning in 2020, the majority of new homes and apartment buildings be built with solar panels on top of them.
That's my problem.
That's the analysis. So did you know the answer, the correct answer?
Of course I did.
Yes, you did. But for the second time in a row, you lost to the one-armed man.
I know. His heat of his palm with the buzzer, there's something going on there.
I had to erase the negative number.
So we're back to parity now, 0-0, going into question 3. Are you ready? Here it is. Which ride-sharing company this week unveiled plans for a flying taxi? ABS.
Uber.
Uber. Uber. Is it Uber?
Uber will pitch its plans for, are you ready for this?
Finally,
flying taxis. The cars will fly 200 miles per hour and use helicopter-style rotors to take off and land.
Wow, that was icy cold. You moved right into the lead position. Yeah. No trace of emotion.
I'll take the Gina Haspel hearings for 500.
that may be the next one. We'll see. Question 4, another multiple choice. This week, Google unveiled a brand new feature in which a robot assistant will do which everyday task so that you don't have to. Is it A, shop for your food, B, make your phone calls, or C, drive your car? Griff Jenkins.
B, make your phone calls.
Make your phone calls is the answer. Is that correct?
Seemingly creepy artificial intelligence that can make dinner reservations for you.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd.
Look at that. 1-1. So going into 5, it is tied. The outcome of this question will determine.
Oh, I'm looking for
pressure.
Okay, are you ready? This is question 5.
For some actual news.
This is actual news. The LAPD, the police department in Los Angeles, America's second largest city, says a famous suit that Robert Downey Jr. wore in a Hollywood film has been stolen. The estimated worth of this suit is $300,000. What is the suit? Let me repeat. What is the suit?
As in fabric?
As in fabric. But what suit is it?
This is a mutiny.
Our judges are saying that we can give you one hint. A superhero movie.
Is Ferris Bueller a superhero?
Is Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Is it the suit that he
was
wore?
he in that movie?
Famously in the superhero
was he in
film.
That movie?
Was Ferris Bueller's Day? Yes, it was, and the sequel. But we'll see if that's correct. Roll the tape.
I think we need some new questions.
The original Iron Man suit, the one Robert Downey Jr. wore in the first movie, was stolen. The suit's reportedly worth $325,000.
This game is losing its
Police released
game.
the sketch of the suspect. If you see anyone who looks...
Okay, so I'm going to ask the judges. The correct answer was Iron Man. Will we take Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Unfortunately, the judges, and I'm quoting, we're not going to be able to take that.
It was close.
ABS, that was valiant. Many were rooting for you, but the one-armed phenom